8.5% of the US population self-host one or another service themselves. What I want is for everybody who has like a legitimate interest in doing this to be able to do it like in a secure way. There is a big possibility for open source software to bridge this gap because it allows for a more bottom-up participation of diverse people.
Welcome back to the Open Matters podcast. In today's episode, we'll take a look at some of the individuals and communities using open source services on their own. We'll explore some of the most up-to-date usage statistics, the motivations behind it all, and as well as that, have a quick look at some of the security implications of hosting your own internet-facing services. Joining us today is Dr. Lea Gröber, a researcher whose work sits at the intersection of psychology, security, and digital infrastructure. Lea has recently completed her PhD and is now a postdoctoral researcher at the International Computer Sciences Institute in Berkeley. She studied topics ranging from self-hosting in the United States to the security challenges of underserved communities in Pakistan. Dr. Lea Gröber, welcome to the podcast. Before we get started, I just wanted to ask you, are you an anthropologist trapped in a computer scientist's body or a computer scientist drawn to people?
So I identify as a computer scientist, but I think that technology should always serve people and not the other way around. So this is why I basically fell down this rabbit hole of empirical human-centered research, especially also in my area of expertise, which is cybersecurity. We oftentimes have the problem that systems are in theory secure, proven to be secure, but in the real world, we see the tech is not really working as intended. There are lots of gaps that we kind of have to bridge. And my area of research is concerned with identifying why things go wrong in the real world and how we can make tech more adaptable to people's needs in the real world so that it's, in the end, really protecting people.
So you have quite an exciting background, especially recently. Until January this year, you were in Germany at the CISPR Helmholtz Center for Information Security. And then I understand you spent the rest of the year until August in Pakistan at the Lahore University of Management Sciences. Where did that come from?
Yes, so throughout my PhD, I spent multiple months already in Pakistan. We have a joint collaboration between CISPR and LAMS. LAMS is the university on site. And we have, I would say, built a very beautiful bridge between the two institutes. So we have people going back and forth. We are learning from each other, which is very beneficial. So I learned a lot while being there. And I have been accepting a position as visiting faculty there to do some field work with marginalized populations to see how technology is not really serving them as it should be.
And now, of course, you're in America. What are you doing now?
Yes, so currently I'm at ICSI, which is a computer science institute, which is affiliated with UC Berkeley. And I'm working on privacy engineering, helping the methods to be better tailored towards practitioners, so software developers, for example, in aiding them to prevent privacy mistakes.
So on this podcast, we've spoken a lot about nations and businesses and governments wanting to do more to control their infrastructure, to have fewer dependencies, to avoid vendor lock-in. Is it fair to say that your work is looking at these same ideas, but at the individual level? Perhaps when one person is trying to run their own sovereign digital microstate?
Yes, certainly you can say that. So in my doctoral thesis, I specifically looked at individual digital sovereignty and roadblocks to that. And my work on self-hosting nicely fits that narrative. But within one or two studies, I also had a more open view towards self-hosting. So specifically the work that I did with Nextcloud. We also looked at organizational instances of self-hosting. So for example, in governments, in companies, so commercial companies, but also in bottom-up privacy collectives, for example, where there's no formal structure, but people are being brought together by a common goal to enhance each other's privacy and give each other digital sovereignty or agency.
tell us about some of your work. I was reading your paper towards privacy and security in private clouds. In there, you do a study of self-hosting in America in particular. What did you find? Is everyone in America self-hosting? Is nobody? What were the big standout numbers you saw?
Yes. So for this specific study, we looked at instances of private self-hosting. So not people who use it like in an institutional environment. So what we found is that actually 8.5% of the US population self-host one or another service themselves. Like we measured this across 5 different use cases, which were files, communication, smart home, websites, and then also password syncing. And this is like an upper bound. So we could estimate that this is the share of people, individual people, not servers or something like this, but people who engage in self-hosting in one or another use case.
So 8.5%. That sounds like quite a lot. So I wouldn't have thought it was that much.
Yeah. We were also, I was actually quite happy because when I first started this line of research, the community was a bit skeptical whether or not this is maybe too niche of a topic to warrant academic attention in a sense. So I am now quite happy that we have at least one data point where we can say it's not that niche. We should look at this.
So is that 8.5% of people who are hyper privacy conscious tinfoil hat wearing types? What were the characteristics of these people?
Yes, so we were very much interested in that. And what we did is we compared the share of self-hosters against a demographically matched control group. And then you can see, okay, with respect to different characteristics, how do they compare? And interestingly, what we found is that privacy concerns on the internet are not a predictor for self-hosting behavior, which was to me very surprising because from my past work on the Nextcloud community, I knew that self-hosting actually is oftentimes connected for people with a desire for enhancing their privacy. Yeah, that was actually very surprising. Same goes for security. So people are not seeking a security advantage when they self-host. At least on a larger scale, you can say that they are not more aware of security on the internet. So some individuals might still seek a security advantage or their motivation can still be to enhance their privacy. But just on a population level, you can say that this is not what discriminates people from the ones who do not self-host. So that's a very interesting finding, in my opinion.
And was that because the privacy consciousness of self-hosters was lower than you expected? Or in fact, the privacy consciousness of the general population was higher than expected? And actually, more people from the general population would all like more privacy?
Yeah, so our working hypothesis going into this quantitative study was that the privacy concerns should be higher. So we based this hypothesis off of the past work and also some empirical evidence and some prior, like a pre-study that we did with people who do self-host and do not self-host. And then we elicited different themes that people thought are connected to self-hosting. So this is why we thought, okay, maybe privacy is a good predictor, but it turned out it isn't.
So what was the factor that stood out as significant in your self-hosting cohort?
What we found is that it's actually the tech skills that make self-hosters unique. So they have skills that are related to server administration, or at least they say they do have these skills. So it's just self-reported data, so we don't actually check whether they have the skills. They just self-identify as having those skills. Which makes sense. So what we can say is that it seems like that the data points to the fact that self-hosting just requires lots of in-depth technical expertise. And this could even highlight maybe the technology landscape is not developed enough for people who do not have these skills to either enter or just remain self-hosters if they started at some point and then maybe ran into issues, It might be that there are people out there who would like to start self-hosting because of privacy concerns, but just the tech landscape doesn't allow them to participate in a sense, And this might be that what we actually are seeing in our data is kind of a survivorship bias.
So it seems to me what you're saying is that actually there's a lot of people who do have these concerns and would prefer greater control over their data and the sort of services they're using. What they are being held back by is just their own capabilities. So it's not that only 8.4% of the population actually care about this. It's just only 8.4% of the population have the capacity to do anything about it.
Yeah, at least that's what we can observe right now. So it's the 8.4% that somehow managed to overcome all of the problems that we know exist in the ecosystem.
Problems is something else that your paper talks about. The title, it was about security, and you seem to suggest there were some questions there amongst this self-hosting cohort. So what were the security risks that you identified amongst this group?
So maybe in general, what we have to say is that you cannot really have privacy without security, especially if you're administrating an internet-facing service. So you always kind of have to think about the security aspects, especially when it comes to self-hosting. And what we found is that many of the self-hosters actually do administrate internet-facing services. So I think websites were the most prominent use case among our samples. So I think almost half of the people had a website, and then also a significant chunk had some IoT services connected to the internet. So this then warrants security questions. And I know from another study that this is also a key issue for people who self-host, not only for people who do not have technical expertise, but also for people who made their way into this landscape because they have an organizational background that demands it from them. So for example, universities do it as well, and they also have issues sometimes. So it's that the security kind of is like a universal thing that is difficult for everybody to navigate.
And was that something that this cohort was aware of? Did they know that they were in a scary world when they are exposing things to the internet? To what extent was there that level of naivety about it?
So I can speak about the Nextcloud study here. It's like a different study I ran prior to the large-scale survey. And here people were very aware of this fact that security is a central issue, but they were also they were basically doing, many of them were doing best effort security in a sense, but they also were kind of uncomfortable with it, I would say, largely. So especially the people who did not have an organizational background, but were just private self-hosters, maybe without a tech background, specifically only embedded in online communities for help. And then it can be quite challenging.
I think it's something that we see quite a lot. We make Collabora Online, we have a community version, and so lots of people are self-hosting their own document editor, often with something like Nextcloud or OpenCloud or Cfile or one of a number of file sync and share solutions. And often we get questions saying, oh, how do I expose this to the internet safely, particularly from our community? And it's very difficult trying to work out how to respond to that question, because it's a very multifaceted and scary world once you are on the internet. So it's the topic of this podcast then, I think. And I wanted to push back a little bit and ask a slightly uncomfortable question. Given you've identified lots of these self-hosting risks, given that people are sort of exposing their local area networks to the internet, and that we are seeing, nearly 10% of the US population doing this, has it gone too far at the moment for the level of technological ability that most people have? Is self-hosting actually quite a bad idea for lots of these people? Are we romanticizing sovereignty while ignoring security risks?
Yeah, so I would say lots of people sometimes think that I want to push everyone to start self-hosting. But for me, it's not the case. What I want is for everybody who has a legitimate interest in doing this to be able to do it in a secure way. But I am well aware that self-hosting is not for everybody, because as I saw in my research, and as is also probably intuitively clear for everybody who touched internet-facing infrastructure at some point, it's quite complex. You either already have the technical expertise or you're willing to build it on the way. And especially security is a major roadblock. And currently also we don't have a lot of great security advice resources that help people in a structured way to approach these challenges. So that being said, I also think that self-hosting can be a viable cornerstone of a privacy-preserving internet. And what I mean by that is that we currently have lots of technologies evolving that are more privacy-friendly, I would say. And a lot of them rely on, say, community-led instances. So, for example, if you look at Mastodon, you have the option to run servers, and then people can kind of pick and choose where they want to be. And this is, in my opinion, like a possibility for many people to also benefit from the privacy-preserving aspects of self-hosting, even if they themselves do not operate the infrastructure. But still, then the same challenges apply. So we kind of have to see, okay, how can we support communities in running infrastructure for their group? Still have to secure it. The same is true for companies. The same is true for governmental institutions. For smaller hosting providers, they might run into similar issues. So we just need better resources.
And so is that something that worries you? I suppose if we did your study again in another 5 or 10 years, we would see a much larger group. Do you think that the number of people self-hosting is going up faster than the level of security resources or the other way around?
Yeah. Actually, I don't have data on this. So I have actually I think there is no data on this. So I have no idea. We could redo the same study again and see how this is developing. This is just basically, we have one data point right now. And it's, for me, impossible to say if this is now increasing or decreasing. So it would be it would be very speculative for me to say something about this. I would hope it's going up maybe a little bit. But I also think realistically, most people will always be hooked up to maybe community-led instances or instances that are in some way or form embedded in an organization, be it commercial or governmental or non-profit.
Well, we look forward to the podcast with you again in 2030 for the next update. Just before we close, then, just one final question. So you studied technology usage amongst the American population, European population, quite recently in Pakistan. With that kind of perspective, what is your hopeful vision for the future of private infrastructure and self-hosting?
Yes. So what I want to work towards is a more privacy-preserving internet, but also internet that's more equitable in a sense. Because what we currently have is that we have lots of centralized services that are kind of operating in a top-down fashion. So people have to use the technology, oftentimes also because it's the only option available to them. But they don't get lots of ways to steer its development. And I saw with the marginalized populations in Pakistan that this can be specifically a problem if threat models aren't accurately considered and the technology is lacking gaps, for example, to protect its users. And I think that there is a big possibility for open source software to bridge this gap because it allows for a more bottom-up participation of diverse people. Maybe it needs to be opened up towards participation that's not just development, because currently it's very heavily focused on developers, which makes sense. But in order to make it more user-friendly, maybe we need to think about alternative ways for different communities to kind of feed and steer the development and just the design of this technology that we all rely on in the end. Yeah, and I think open source is a building block for this, and yeah, it kind of connects to self-hosting also because self-hosting. I mean, it doesn't require open source software, but it's often a good option for that.
Dr. Lea Gröber, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. It's been amazing listening to you. We wish you the best of luck in all of your future research.
Thank you.